follow along, start up After Effects, start a new comp. I've got an HD comp with a black background. I like the black background because it makes it easier to see the shapes as we work with them. Now, if you've been working through this course sequentially, then you've worked with text animation presets. And when you did that, you created a text layer and applied a preset to that layer. Now, shape presets don't work that way. They are, in effect, shapes unto themselves. If you have an existing shape and apply a shape preset to it, it in effect destroys the existing shape and replaces it with the new preset. So you really want to apply shapes to nothing. Use them from scratch. So let's take a look at some shape presets by going to Effects and Presets over here on the right, clicking this little flyout menu, the panel menu, and clicking on Browse Presets. That opens up Bridge to the After Effects Presets folder and all these groups of presets here. Let's open up the Shapes group. And there are 4 subgroups here. Look at the backgrounds. You can click on them and see their animation. There you go. Go to the next one here, or go to Elements. Take a look at one of them. There you are. Going down the line, the sprites animated. Something like this. And then finally go down to sprites still. Presets are supposed to simplify your life. You apply them and you kind of jump-start a project because you already have several things done for you in advance. And that will work really well with these still presets. But the animated presets are kind of complicated and introduce a new thing called expressions. So I'm going to explain those in a second. We'll start with these still presets just so you can see how they're constructed and also get a sense of the things you can do to customize them. So I'm going to open up 3 of them. We'll start with the mandala here. Just double-click on it and that'll bring it in as a new shape layer. I'll click away so it's not selected anymore and go back to Bridge. Double-click on Indian Sun. Same thing, click away so it's not selected anymore. Go back to Bridge. And then double-click on Gear 1. Alright, we've got these 3 guys here inside After Effects. I'm going to turn off the visibility for the top 2 there, working with the one we applied first, the mandala, which is called number 1 here. I'm going to make it larger just by clicking on it and expanding it. There you go, holding down the Shift key to constrain it. There we go. Okay, that's, I think, lovely. And you know that you can change the colors, you can animate the colors, change the size of the stroke and things like that. But how did they create this thing? I think it's cool to see how they did this stuff. So I'm going to open it up, take a look at the contents, take a look at the group here, and see that we have 1 polystar inside there. That's it, just 1 polystar. And what makes it different than normal? What makes it different than normal are the inner and the outer roundness. They're huge numbers. If I bring them down, let's say to 0, just to get down to the default numbers, here we go. You're going to see that this thing started out as a 9-point star. That's it, a very simple star. So I go back to 2000 for the outer roundness, and 500 for the inner roundness. There we go. That's what we end up with, all right? Let's close that up and go up to the next one. The next one is the sun. Let me click on it, expand it as well so you get a better look at it. There you go. Let's open it up and see what its contents look like. In the group here, we've got 2 shapes, Polystar 1 and Ellipse 1. So how's it that these 2 guys are working together? Well, they work together in a way that you haven't seen up to this point. Let's take a look at only the Polystar. There you go. It's your basic star. Open it up. It's got, 20-something points, 24 points. And the inner roundness kind of describes its look. There, we pull it in a bit. That makes it narrow there, kind of like a sun. That's not the real issue. That's not what's making the center go away. Let's close this up. Let's take a look at the next guy. I'll close off this polystar there and open up the ellipse, and it's just a circle. So how is it that a circle and the sun go together, or the circle and the star go together, and why is it black there in the middle? Well, that's an unusual little thing that's being done inside the fill, which we haven't discussed up to this point. But you take a look at the fill, and look at the fill rule. The fill rule by default is non-zero winding, meaning they just kind of blend together like that, or the one on the bottom here covers the one above it. But here they have what's called an even odd, so basically it kind of works in reverse, that's all. There's another way to create that black hole like that. That's to use something called merge paths, and I'll show you that in a second. So let's close that down and take a look at the next one. And just as a reminder, I'm showing you these so you can see how people make these really cool shapes. Keep in mind, you can animate these things, you can change their colors, you can customize them to your heart's content. Okay, here's this third one, this gear. We see a group and a group. Kind of an unnecessary extra level of organization, but there we go. Inside this group at the bottom here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different shapes here. So what is going on here? Well, let's click on this guy and make it larger so we can get a better look at it. There we go. I'm going to turn off these guys down below here so you see them just from the top down. So we start off with this star. Now we didn't end up with a star, we ended up with this. So what's going on? Well, we cut off these guys somehow and added these flat areas using the other shapes. I'll turn these guys off again. And the second area gives you the flat area. Let's just take a look at how that works. The way they go together is that you merge their paths. I talked about merging the paths before, but there you go, you merge the paths. The way you merge the path here is by adding a path operator, it's called. The path operators are added up here. We're going to discuss that in the next lesson, but there's the merge path operator. Let me scroll down again here. And how do they merge them? They merge them as an intersection like that. So wherever they overlap, more or less, then that's what you see. Where they don't overlap, it goes away. If I did add, then it would do that. So we're going to go back to intersect here. That's how that works. And again, we're going to talk about this in the next lesson. So that's how those guys go together. Now we need to get those little flat areas here. So we add another one. And now they're flat. Why did that happen? Well, because we merged the paths again here. Although we didn't really need to merge the path in this case because it did it all by itself, but the people who made this decided to add a merge paths operator there anyways, despite the fact that it worked by default. And finally, there's this little hole in the middle. How do you create the hole in the middle? Well, before, they used that fill change where it's even odd. Let me turn these guys off for a second. Take a look at this ellipse here. It's just another circle. So how can a circle become black? I'll show you in a second. Here we go, scrolling down. Here's another merge paths. And before I click the eyeball, this merge paths has what's called a subtract. Whatever thing you got there, you're going to subtract from this shape. So when you turn on that merge paths, then it subtracts the whole. The little circle that was there now is an empty space. And now you can put a stroke around the outside there as well. There you go. And now you're done. So this is how you make a gear. And this is not an unusual thing to make in the shape world. And you can see that you obviously can change the colors, the size, the number of points, all kinds of stuff here using this preset. All right, what I want to do now is go back to Bridge and show you some other ones that are a little more complex. I'm going to go over to the shapes and sprites animated and take a look at this mandala. We just saw the mandala a second ago, but this one animates like that. And how does that happen? I want to show you this because it uses something we have not touched on called expressions. And if you don't know how to deal with them, you won't know how to have the animation go the way you want it to go. So I'm going to double click on that. It's going to add another layer there on top. Let me blow it up so you can see it better. There you go. Let's take a look at it. It is the mandala we saw down earlier, but this one has extra things going on. It has an effects property group there, something you haven't seen. Let's open up that effects property group. Inside the effects property group, it has something called animated shape control. Now that is not an effect that you can find over here. This is a custom made effect made by the folks who put together this preset. Let me pull this down a little bit. This animated shape control group has these 5 properties in it. And these 5 properties are what are called expression controls. When you work with what are called expressions, you can control them with these expression controls. And the expression controls are, in fact, effects. They're over here in the expression controls group. And basically what they are these basic effects that look like this. There are different kinds of effect controls throughout all the effects inside After Effects. Different types. One that have points, one that just change numbers, ones that have degrees, things like that. And so you can create effects that have these controllers in them, and then connect these controllers to the properties that you want to control. So right now these things by themselves, if they weren't connected in some way, would do nothing. But once you connect them, then they can do something. So these guys use expressions, and the expressions connect from the properties in the shape to these controls, and then you can animate these controls with keyframes to cause this guy to behave the way you want. And boy, if you aren't confused by now, I'd be surprised, because it is kind of confusing, this whole expression thing. But let me show you how they look, and we'll talk about expressions later in this course. We open up this group here, look at the polystar, and you see these red numbers. Anything with red numbers has an expression associated with it. Basically, it's a mathematical formula like algebra. If you take a look at it, it may look really complicated, and I guess it is complicated, but that's because there's all these names here. But the names really are the names of those effects down below. Those effects will control the behavior of the inner radius, outer radius, inner roundness, outer roundness. All these guys have these little things attached to them that control the behavior. You could control the behavior here with keyframes, but rather than do it here, it's done below inside this effect group down here, because here it's a little more intuitive. It talks about speed, dimensions, that kind of stuff. So let's just take a look, for instance, at speed. I'll just play this for a second. That's the default speed of 10. If I slow it down, something like, 4 or 5, something like that. There we go. It'll go slower. Now we know it's speed here because it's named speed here, but if you had tried to figure out which of these guys up here would control the speed, we might have trouble to do that. But here, this guy is intuitive because it's named speed. The dimensions again like this, affect the inner radius, outer radius, inner roundness, that kind of stuff. So we can animate these guys if we want to right there. So-called spread, like that. So these things are all animatable. We can keyframe these things and cause these things to behave differently. And then the random seed here, this just says basically how this thing starts. You decide how it's going to start, and then it goes from there. It doesn't become more or less random depending on the seed here. It just sort of starts at a different appearance. That's basically how that works. So when you get something like this, and you see this extra thing down here, the animated shape control, you know you need to use these guys to control the keyframes for how this thing behaves. You can change colors and that kind of stuff back up here inside the shape, like the stroke and the fill. But as far as its behavior physically, you want to use these controls down here to take care of that. All right, let's click away from here and just take a look at one more, just so you can see one more thing, how that works. Turn the eyeball off here and go back to bridge. Go one more notch over here to the elements, because this one uses actual effects in addition to the customized effects. Let's take a look at that one, double click it. And remember how beautiful the colors were over here? Very lovely, right? Go back to After Effects, and what happened? Well, this is because of the way the colors are laid out. I'm going to go take a look at this guy, open it up. It too has this Effects Properties group. Inside the Effects Properties group, you see it's got Animated Shape Control. That's the guy we talked about before. That's the custom one with the expression controls. But it's also got 4-color gradient and bevel alpha. These things are honest to goodness Adobe After Effects effects. And they show up here inside the Effect Controls panel. You see the 4-color gradient's got 4 colors and has points. Each point defines where this color resides in this 4-color gradient that goes around this object. But if you take a look at the 4-color gradient by clicking on it, you'll see these points show up. These points are associated with these points here. But there are only 2 here, right? And they're off to the side here. In fact, there are 4. Let me zoom out a bit to 25%. There are the 4 points. So when you use a preset like this and it doesn't quite do what you want it to do, it's because you need to customize it yourself. So here are these 4 color points, but here's the object. Let me expand the object here by just pulling it out a bit here, holding the shift key. You can now see the color kind of kicking in. There you go. Now you can take these points and position them. So if you watch the numbers over here, watch what happens to point number 4. I'm changing the position for point number 4. And point number 4, as you see, is blue. Change this one here. That's point number 3. And it's purple or red, like that. Change this one here. This is point number 2, and that's green. And then point number 1 is yellow. So you can change the position of these guys. You can animate them. Let me show you how to do that down here. Open this up like that. So you can animate the positions down here with keyframes. And you can animate the colors too. It's really quite remarkable. You can click on any one of these color swatches, like the red one there, for example. You can change the color to something else if you like so. And notice how it changes down here. You can keyframe the color like that. Go inside here a bit and change the color to something entirely different if you care to. And it'll just change over time like that. So you can keyframe all these characteristics, not only in this effect, but in any other effect. And one more little point here. Let me take a look at this. Take a look at one of these groups. There are 4 groups. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 different groups here, each one with a different shape. Let's just take a look at one of the groups. You see that it's an ellipse. That has something called trim. Trim is another one of those operations that you can add over here. There's trim paths. When you trim the path, it's kind of like working with text animation. If you remember text animation, let's take a look at that. It's got a start and an end and an offset. These things are being animated here down in this other effect, this custom effect here, the animated shape controls. And these guys talk about the random seed, meaning where those guys start and how fast they go, which you can adjust down here. So if you want to adjust how fast it spins around, you put keyframes down here. If you want to adjust where it starts, essentially, you adjust the random seed. So that is a look at shape presets. They're a little more complex than other presets in that you have your work cut out for you when they're animated. You've got to deal with these expressions, and you work with the expressions down here in this effect that they've customized for you called the Animated Shape Control group.